Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you, President Cartwright, Provost Johnson, for joining us. So this is one of the Senate leadership updates, our second of the summer. And we're going to start by having the Provost who's going to give get us up to date on a couple of things and take questions. And then the President will join in after and do the same thing, give a little presentation and then be able to answer some questions. So let's hold off questions until after they're done with their what they want to share with us, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. King, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me start with some faculty highlights, in this case from space research. Planetary scientists Carrie Donaldson-Hanna and Addie Dove are going to direct a $35 million NASA-funded mission to an unexplored part of the moon, the Groot-Huijsen domes. This mission is supposed to launch in 2026. It'll study the dome's chemical composition, because if I understand it right, the domes show evidence of having formed in an odd way, perhaps in the presence of water. And they'll also investigate how dust interacts with a spacecraft and rover, practical questions for future exploration. I think this summer, a great many of us have been delighted to see the first deep space pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope. You may not all know that some of your colleagues, researchers from UCF, are among the scientists who have observing time. These include the former Senate chairs Joseph Harrington, and Jan Fernandez, Charles Chambeau, Zoe Landsman, and Naomi Pinella Alonso. And I hope I didn't miss anybody. Among other things, they'll research exoplanets and comets and distant moons, properties of planetary systems. Dr. Pinella Alonso was recently featured in a Bloomberg documentary about the telescope for her studies that include observations of trans-Neptunian objects. So this is fun research. It's hard for mathematicians to do things which the rest of us can appreciate, and that's true in some disciplines. The space work like this is just endlessly fascinating, and I'm really enjoying reading about it. Night Vision went live July 1st. We replaced PeopleSoft, the finance and HR parts of PeopleSoft, with Workday, and we launched a partial staff reorganization into finance and HR business centers. Any rollout of this scale has snags, and we expected them. And in fact, we've gotten the type we expected, mostly workflow issues, security roles that are incorrectly set, things like that. And we're just working to correct them. Hundreds and hundreds of issues have developed and hundreds of issues have been fixed. The greatest concern I've heard in the last week, it was from some deans worried about getting faculty and GTAs and others in place before classes begin. And the central team has jumped all over this and is prioritizing it. It includes things like adjuncts getting hung up because of a system desire that they get background checks again. And we'll seek to clear all of that. My greatest concern is adequate training. I think most of the staff involved have gotten past the start line. That is to say, they've gotten into the system, they've started to see how things work, they're raising their problems and getting them answered. Next is faculty. We're going to have training sessions specifically for faculty in the next few weeks. There is onboarding and training help available now on the Night Vision website. And I'd encourage you to look at it. Some of it's very straightforward and simple. I messed with some of it. How do you do the equivalent of a TAR, something called a spend authorization in Workday? But some of it is not trivial, and that includes some of the grant-related work, and that's what I'm most eager that we get good training for. Even with the best of training, let me say that we're going to have adjustments and corrections that'll continue for months. That is just the way it works with a major enterprise-wide project like this. It's not like buying Microsoft Word and installing it on your computer. It's really a very big deal for an organization. So my request is that you please give feedback. That includes complaints. Feedback drives improvement, but I'd ask you to please do so with a degree of kindness. There's a lot of people working very hard to make this work. And I would appreciate, both your collaboration and your forbearance to help us make this a success. Bits of news. Fall enrollment looks to be about 4% down on headcount, a little bit less down on student credit hours. We expect to end up somewhere around 68,000 students. This is a result of somewhat fewer transfers, somewhat smaller return of existing students and master's students, and admitting some more FTIC students to make up some of the difference. Master's students, as I said, are down. Some of this we think is perhaps a result of a good economy. Some of it's a result of an improved four-year graduation rate. We really jumped in how many of our students are getting out in 4 years instead of longer at the bachelor's level. That's a good reason. Doctoral enrollment has stayed solid. It's about flat from last year, which to me is a great success, frankly, of graduate studies and people in a great many departments, because admitting doctoral students became harder this year with the Foreign Influence Act. A couple of hires I'll just mention briefly. Dr. Grant Hayes will start Monday as the new dean of CCIE. He's been interim provost and senior vice chancellor the last several years at East Carolina University. Before that, dean of their College of Education. For Grant, this is a return to UCF, and I'm very happy to welcome him back. I'm equally pleased that Dr. Paul DeSalle has begun as our new first senior vice president for student success. You'll be hearing a great deal more from Paul in coming months. And we're right now in the process of identifying committee members to kick off the search for the new vice president for research. So that's most of the news I wanted to talk about. And now I'd really like to dig into a couple of challenging topics, starting with some departmental anti-racism statements that were pulled down a couple of weeks ago at my direction. And I want to explain why. And I'm happy to discuss this further as time permits. So here's my thinking. We want this university to be a place where all students feel welcome and feel supported, and where they can try out new ideas, where they can meet with others who are not like them and learn from them. This is a core value of a university like UCF. It reflects our very great diversity. We have students who are Hispanic, Black, white, Asian, and more, students who are straight and LGBTQ+, veterans and active military, first-generation students, students who start as freshmen, many transfers, students with financial situations from comfortable to struggling. We've got working adults, we've got parents, we've got this tremendous mix of students. Our faculty teach this tremendous diversity of students, in my opinion, with tremendous skill. You help students learn the difference between evidence and opinion, reason and ideology. Students in your classes have an opportunity to explore new ideas and discuss them, and to learn from others, and in the end to form their own judgments. And this is civil discourse in action, as it should be the case in education. I've been here a long time, and I've watched a lot of faculty in action, and I know that this skill extends to very controversial topics, presenting information and ideas that can cause students to question what they've grown up hearing or believing, even topics that challenge a person's identity, the hardest kind of thing to open your mind to. So my difficulty with some of the anti-racism statements, with parts of some of the anti-racism statements, is how different they are from how our faculty actually teach. The statements tend to suggest that there's only one way to view the world. They're somewhat absolutist. I don't think you introduce a challenge. I don't think you do this. I don't think you introduce challenging topics to your students by stating exactly what they should believe. I think this is done by presenting information and evidence and data objectively, and presenting various possible explanations of that data, theoretical constructs. You encourage discussion. You let students try on ideas. And very importantly, you let them draw their own conclusions. I think that we require our students to understand but it's not education to require them to believe. So the anti-racism statements, in my mind, were without any doubt aiming to do good and aiming to welcome students. Faculty wanted to assure students of color, I think especially Black students, following the murder of George Floyd, that the faculty understood systemic differences in society and in higher education, and they were committing to work to address these differences. But I saw a problem with the language, and I think that perhaps the audience for which these were written. I'd ask, how would these statements be read by someone with no shared lived experiences to what the statements address? I fear that other students reading these statements might not feel welcomed in the classroom of the faculty that issued them. That these students would be reluctant to speak their minds, that they would be less able to learn. I think with controversial subjects, there's a risk of shaming some students. And I think that shaming blocks your ability to be vulnerable and to understand and to learn. So I believe that it would be helpful to view the primary audience for these statements as our students, our entire student body, students who might come into our classes, students who come with a wide diversity of beliefs, but who come prepared to be educated. I discussed this concern with a couple of the deans who had departments with these statements. And in the end, asked those deans to pull down the statements pending revisions. And my intention is to ask the faculty who issued these to revise them in the fall for reposting. But doing so, thinking of their audience, as I said, primarily as their first audience as our students, our entire student body in all of its diversity, students who come with a wide range of beliefs prepared to be educated. So, that's the reasons behind this. I really recognize that this is an upsetting thing to watch. And many of you will hear that and disagree with me, and that's okay. I actually have already said that I think the purpose of education is to help people understand, not to require belief. But I hope this, maybe with additional conversation, will help you understand. And I hope that we can end up in a better place with these statements. Prepared to address this more in questions. But first, I also wanted to mention what I think is the most important legislative change, which is probably House Bill 7. This newly enacted law alters Florida's civil rights law that prohibits discrimination, and it did it by defining certain acts as discriminatory. So Jana Jasinski and Faculty Excellence worked with some faculty and others to find the kinds of questions that people had and got some of the preliminary ideas, developed some facts, FAQs, which I hope you've seen. They're on the FCTL website. And Jan and I are planning to meet with some departments together with deans as the fall starts to talk through their concerns and the specifics for their disciplines. I think two fundamental things about this law. First, that I believe it codifies what our faculty already know is a professional responsibility to educate, not to indoctrinate. I think it's also the case that the law causes anxiety. As you'll see, as I believe, I don't think this law changes the way we teach, but I do think it's really important to work with faculty who are concerned about it and listen to the issues and make sure that we can explain adequately or seek answers to questions to give people a degree of confidence in what they do. So as I said before, my fundamental belief about this is that in your classes, you, our faculty, help students learn the difference between evidence and opinion, reason and ideology. You present evidence, information, data, knowledge. You present theories, possible explanations. You encourage discussion. You let students try on ideas and you let them draw their own conclusions. I don't think you proselytize your students. So most fundamentally important thing for me to say is this: you can and you should continue to teach challenging and controversial topics. Students in your classes, you require to understand this information. They don't, of course, have to agree. with your conclusions or any other student's conclusions. That's education as opposed to indoctrination. The law states that you need to teach in that manner, the manner that I believe you always have taught. I think it's the way that we've all viewed as our professional responsibility. So what is the risk? What if a student complains? If a student alleges that a faculty member has crossed that line, we will have to investigate. But please know that's always been the case. We get the occasional rare complaint about a faculty member behaving unprofessionally in the classroom, and we investigate, as is our responsibility. We don't, and we won't assume that a complaint is true. And as I've already said, it's my own belief that anything that turns out to cross the line is far more likely to be inadvertent than purposeful, and we will help faculty learn from that kind of experience and how to avoid repeating it. Could there be worse consequences? Of course there could. If a faculty member knowingly and willingly violates the law and continues to do so, that is to say, behaves in an illegal and discriminatory fashion, we would have to enter into our standard path of progressive discipline. That's occasionally happened with faculty, as I said, over the years. But with over 1,000 faculty, half of whom teach controversial subjects, it's less than one a year. It's an unusual circumstance. And I frankly would be surprised to see that happen in the coming years, certainly in a way that actually violates the law. But if it does happen, we would, of course, have to take disciplinary action. The law has very serious consequences. If the university ignored violations or permitted them to continue, the law puts us at risk of losing $32 million of our state funding, what I would describe as a catastrophic amount. But again, really, my point is the following. Please continue to behave professionally. I don't think you need to change how you teach. Educate your students. Help them examine appropriate topics in your discipline, no matter how controversial or challenging. Help them learn. Help them test new ideas. Try them on. Help them engage in civil discourse. Please let them draw their own conclusions. Don't tell them there's only one true way to think, right? That's what the law forbids. I think you've always done this, and I really am confident that our faculty will continue to do so. My pledge is to try to help faculty work through concerns that they have as this semester gets going, so they have confidence in their ability to do their job. So let me conclude by thanking you for being willing to serve on the Senate. I've really been grateful to work with this group for the past 2 years, really helped us figure out how to work our way through COVID, for example. The Senate helps us work through complications like the new laws. And I'm really looking forward to working with this group in the year ahead. And Dr. King, that concludes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have time for.
Thank you, Provost Johnson. Yeah, we will take some questions. I want to start first with some of the chat. So we have some questions about big problems with payroll, Mason Cash. Yes, I agree. People not being paid is a significant issue. Jana Jasinski wrote in here, if you have specific information, to work with her and identify what those are. And then, do you want to address that anymore, Provost Johnson? Anything else to say on the issues there?
The part that I knew about, but it sounds like there might be something I didn't know about, is what Joe Harrington brought up at the end. In PeopleSoft, the way GRAs, GTAs, I think all hourly people were paid, was based on a calculation of their hours in a given week. So they might get less in their first partial week, a certain larger amount in intermediate weeks, and less again in a final partial week. And Workday by default does something different. It pays them equally per pay period. So it's more upfront and less at the end and somewhat lower in the middle. And I actually don't know, Jan, I don't know if you know if that's going to be changed in the short run, or if that's something that, is something we're stuck with in Workday right now. Do you know that one?
So I've been trying to work behind the scenes here and get information from HR, and what you're talking about is primarily correct. Workday takes the total amount and does equal checks. I don't know if that's changing. Maybe Gerald will know if it's changing, but it's, yes. And I'm looking into, Michelle and I've had a behind the scenes thing going on here. I'm checking to her thing specifically. But yes, with the GRAs, the same thing happened. It takes the total amount and splits it into 4 or how many are pay periods, which is different than before.
I didn't realize Gerald Hector is here. Gerald, is there any
Yes,
further?
I'm here. I got on late, so I only saw Joe's comment in the chat. What you described, Mike, is absolutely correct. I didn't see the other cases. Just saw a note popped up that there's something different that what Michelle is talking about. As the provost said, as things come up, we need to know and hear. I just got off a call with Jana and a couple of people on HR about our past practices around adjuncts, GRAs, GTAs, and quite frankly, we didn't have a process that was clear and cogent. Now Workday is forcing us to do that. So I'd be more than happy to hear the issues that are coming up and we tackle them one by one. So Jana raised yesterday that some of our summer faculty experience the same thing. But when we look at the start dates and how those things are done, it's the same issue. So in PeopleSoft, we would have configured things on certain ways depending on the type of faculty pay. 9 months over 9 months, 9 months over 10, 9 months over 11, and 9 months over 12. We did not have any consistency across the different colleges. So literally, just while I was late to get on this call, was for us to talk through how we can get consistency across all of our colleges, if that is at all possible. So I would just say to the Senate here, if there are particular cases that you are aware of, please reach out and we will run them down individually. We paid well over 12,195 people. And to date, I think the total number of cases that we're looking into is probably less than 20. But 20 is enough. So please just let us know and we will make sure we look into it and figure out what the issues are.
Can I give a personal example? Because I don't want to talk about anyone else's pay other than my own, even though I know this is happening with other 9-month faculty. Just so you know, because there may be other people in your units that are experiencing this. My contract for summer states that every 2 weeks I'll receive pay of $1,196. So I have created my budget to live on $600 a week over the summer. July 1st, when Workday kicked in, it split it so it went to prorate or not prorated pay, which reduced my gross pay for this Friday from $1,196 to $777. I was told that the missing pay would be included in my August 26th paycheck, which will be part of my fall contract. I don't think I need to convince anyone that with only getting $600 a week, losing over 200 of that for the next 4 weeks puts me in a difficult situation. And I told Jana, I'll tell anyone, my personal situation, if this doesn't get fixed by tomorrow, I'm going to AmScot for a payday loan, which is sad to have to do 17 years into a teaching career at UCF. I create my budget so I can live on this 15 hours a week pay, but I can't live on the $418 less. And it's not just me that this has happened to. I actually raised kind of the question because I had just looked at the pay stub early. Many other people are going to discover this is the case on Friday if they didn't look at the pay stub early. And I talked to several people about it in the College of Sciences and was told there's really, at this point, nothing they could do because they don't know how to prorate in Workday.
Well, I will say this. Jana brought this to my attention yesterday. Until I heard it from Jana yesterday, that's not something that we were aware of. So like I'm saying, just like the GRAs came up and we addressed that and got the communication out, gave them the calculations and everything, it is not as large of a differential there on the smoothing. They're going to get the same exact amount over the contract period, but your point is well taken. So I will follow up with the team to see what can be done, Michelle, but I just learned of this particular issue yesterday. I will say what I just learned today in the last meeting I was just a part of, and since this is the Senate, we're going to try to deal with the fact that we're still hiring summer B faculty even to this day, to today. That's a process thing. That's not a Workday thing. But what I have asked everyone to do is now that we're getting to a system that requires us to have a repeatable and standardized process, we are going to have to look at how we mitigate some of these things in the short term, because we, quite frankly, can't afford to have the kind of haphazardness that we've had in the past. But I've asked Jana. Jana is actually going to be sending some names to Becky Moulton based on our conversation yesterday to see what we can do. So if there are folks impacted, if they reach out, we are trying to do things about it. But I will say to the faculty senate here, one of the things that we have to do is to standardize as much as we can our processes, so it's not being done college by college. And quite frankly, that's how some of these things have gotten missed, aside from the workday smoothing, if you will, that basically takes a contract and divides it equally over the time period from the start date to the end date across our pay period. So that's something we are aware of, and that's something we're working through. But Michelle, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And I think we addressed, Joe had, we mentioned the point Joe brought up about the GRAs. So I think we're all set on that topic.
Yes, I think with the GRAs, we reached out to all of them. A communication was sent when we actually found out about it. And I've asked the team if there are, similar to Michelle, if anyone calls and says, hey, look, this is where things are. We have given them actually a detailed explanation of how it's done. So we have not heard back anything yet, but if we hear, obviously we're gonna address it, dealing with it one piece at a time, because as I said, everyone is different. The GRAs, the all the acronyms that they are, depending on colleges, they're pretty much all set up differently, and that's something that we're gonna have to look at prospectively. Right now is to triage and get us through this period of our till we get to what I call stabilization.
And Joe has his hand up, which I think is probably related.
I guess the one thing I haven't heard that I really need to hear is that, yes, there was a goof. Some of these contracts do state X amount will be paid on Y date, and we didn't do that. And telling people you're going to get that money a month from now is not okay. I know we need to standardize stuff. I know we need to do all kinds of things to improve our processes, but these people need to be made whole, you know, as soon as it's possible to write checks. And I guess I would like to hear that, Jared. I'd like to hear that from you, that if a contract states when something will be paid and we didn't do that, that we're not waiting until late August to do it. We're doing it as soon as it's possible to cut checks.
What I would do, Joe, I can say to everyone here unequivocally, we'll do what we have to do to make people whole. We do need, however, to understand what that is, and we have to look at them case by case. Right? Because what we're seeing is we have contracts, we have no standardization, as I said before, but we will do what we can to make people whole. And however we have to do that, I will get with the teams to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question in the chat we have from Christina Tollison. Can you be more specific about how the anti-racism statements didn't align with the university's values as the public statement indicated? Is the university still anti-racism?
Yeah, that actually was what I was trying to do with my explanation. So the values that I think really are at the core of educating in a diverse university is that we welcome all students and staff and faculty and visitors, regardless of background. In the case of students, all of them have an opportunity to learn. All of them are to be treated with respect. All of them have a chance to express their views. All of them are free to draw their own conclusions. You know, I think that, so that was my concern with the statement, is that they were focused so much on I think they were focused on support and assurance to a group of our students that they were going to make it harder for others who come into your classes with just a huge variety of beliefs, preconceptions, and lived experiences to believe that they would be treated fairly or be even open to learning from you. So that's the value that I was talking about. Yes, we still are an anti-racist university. Yes, we won't accept racism in any form. But so what I'm really asking, this is I don't think it's necessarily easy. But again, let me ask, how would you write those statements if this was the beginning of a class with your students, knowing that your students come from all directions? Would you start that way? Would you start with a definitive statement about the right way to believe? Would you approach this subject in a different manner? Because I believe our faculty teach these very controversial subjects related to race or inequality or any number of other things quite well, I have a degree of confidence that people can write this with an understanding the audience to be students, not just a generic public or disciplinary peers, can write them in a way which will help students enter into this conversation and not make it harder for them to enter into this conversation. So yes, be anti-racist. I believe we should be. How in the world could we accept, support, permit racism on our campus? We need to take actions which work against it. But I'm really talking about language, and you are a bunch of people who think very carefully about language. You thought about it from one perspective, and I'm asking to think about it from another.
If I may follow up, there are things that are facts, and there are things that are opinions, and I think we need to be able to speak about facts.
100%.
Just because everyone doesn't believe them doesn't mean they're true.
100%. I agree with you. I could not agree with you more. Teach facts, teach knowledge, teach evidence. Do so without concern. Distinguish them from opinion or theoretical conclusion or explanation of the reason behind the facts. There is a difference, right? And I know you all know that. So you distinguish those as you always do.
I would like to know what in the statements you thought were opinion and not fact.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, that's a different, sorry, I was responding to a different statement. Okay, I thought you were talking about how you teach in the classroom. So what I'm saying about the statements isn't about their veracity, what is fact, what is opinion, what is judgment. In fact, it was about the nature of the language, which I think was not designed to draw students into education. That is to say, I think it made it harder for students to open themselves in a vulnerable way, which can let them learn about subjects that they find challenging that they never thought about. So it's about how it's presented rather than what's presented. At least that was my reasoning at the time, Christina. It's how I still think about it today.
Did you personally read all the statements before they were taken down?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have a lot in the chat on this, so instead of going through all of those, I just want to have people raise some questions directly to the provost, so we don't get bogged down in some of this text. So if you have, Shelley, you have a great statement in here. If you want to pick something in there for us to start with, that would be great.
I'm going to let the anti-racism stuff go, but I would say that you did not answer Christina's question, which was give me a specific example of something that you thought was untoward or discriminatory. But I am more interested at the present moment about fall, right? There are many of us who teach as our areas of expertise the very topics we're not supposed to talk about. And while it is certainly the case that none of us sets out to create student discomfort, discomfort can happen when you are teaching courses that are specifically about race, class, gender, colonialism, and so forth. So I would like to know, should a student come and be disgruntled, and what I'm imagining here is not in fact one of my normal students, but the likelihood of plants being sent into courses that certain think tanks are flagging. So should a student come with a complaint, what is the process whereby that complaint will be handled.
Yeah, let me first say, the law does not say you should not address certain topics of the type that you mentioned. It really does not say that. There's, we've read that law pretty carefully. We've listened to what the legislators said as they answered questions from one another about it. And it's very clear that they understood that it is our responsibility to teach subjects like this that you just described. Okay, what they were concerned about is, I think, actually a myth, which is that faculty try to indoctrinate students to believe the way they want them to believe, as opposed to what you just said, Shelley, which is learning about these topics.
Well,
So-
no, let me push back here, right? I forget how many statements there are now, right? Or whatever their points are. Right? Most of them I recognize, and most of us recognize as red meat, okay, to the voter base, right? Which is to demonize teachers who are out there trying to make their poor children feel uncomfortable. And those accusations are just stupid. We don't do those things. But there are two claims, there are two of those lines that come very close to things some of us have been trained our entire careers in, okay? Which is talking about oppression, talking about privilege, talking about the ways in which concepts such as objectivity and neutrality and so forth have an impact that is discriminatory, right? These are things about the way structural discrimination works. They're not pointing fingers at anybody in particular, but as, for example, in my case, as a feminist philosopher, right? That is at the core of what feminist epistemology has said for decades. So I'm going to teach those things. And that's part of my professional training, to teach those things. So yes, I'm vulnerable. If I teach according to the professional standards of my own discipline, okay, I am at risk of breaking the law, period.
I'm not sure I understand why, Shelley, and I will be coming to talk to philosophy along with some other departments. It would be very helpful for me to hear that, explained.
And I am using this as just as an example
Sure.
that's me, but it is not just me. This goes across many disciplines. People who teach intersectional feminism, people who teach critical race theory. This is across social sciences and humanities, and there are many, many of us. So I welcome your visit to philosophy, but we're not the only ones you need to talk to.
Of course, I just mentioned that because I think it's useful to work through some examples. The law does not say you should stop teaching those things. I just have to say that as plainly as I can. It's worth another look at that law with a cold eye and ask, what does it require? What does it forbid? It says we can't tell somebody that they should feel guilt by virtue of the color of their skin. Well, that's a distortion.
Those are the ones that are red meat. Those are not the ones I'm worried about, except for the plants that will put themselves in some of our classes.
Okay, then let me answer the other part of it. There could be bad faith complaints or good faith complaints or just students who want to complain. So what will we do? What we do we encourage all students, and we really do this. Since the Let's Be Clear time, we've encouraged students who are unhappy about treatment, whether it's in a classroom or elsewhere, by a faculty member or staff member, call the integrity line. What we're going to do is have this first checked by OIE, the Office of Institutional Equity. And if it's a, let me call it, traditional accusation of some discriminatory behavior, sexual harassment or something, they will use their ordinary investigatory process. If it's about a classroom in HB7 and this kind of thing, they're going to hand this off to a small group of academically oriented people, and I haven't figured out exactly who yet, to hear out what the concern is. And my anticipation is that in nearly every case, it will be either a misunderstanding on the student's part or an inadvertent crossing of a line by a faculty member. And we will ask those, we will explain, really require, state to the faculty member, This is how you avoid crossing that line. We have to do that, Shelley, under the law. I think the only time this turns into a disciplinary matter for faculty is when they willingly and knowingly continue to violate the law. And despite what you just said, I don't think it's the teaching according to the standards of your training and your discipline that will cause you to violate the law. I think it would be things of the sort that are explicitly forbidden, that you absolutely must believe that in my classroom, as opposed to you must demonstrate to me your understanding of these things that I'm here to help you learn. So, I think I really get the concern. I mean, I think, especially when you're not confident of the motives of the people who've written a law, when you see the public discourse around, political division, it's very natural to be concerned. Today, I really want people to hear, please don't avoid the topics, which are the appropriate topics for your discipline in your class. Please, please. If we can help with specifics, how do you do this and not cross the line of the law, we'll do everything in our power to help people do that.
One last thing, and then I want to let others in. Right? What would really help is that we are in a climate where, yes, things are going badly, rapidly in the state of Florida. And we are in a climate that is demonizing faculty and teachers. And what would really help is if the administrators of the institutions we work for, we felt would have our back. And I'm not feeling that. I'll let others speak for themselves, but I'm not feeling that at all. I'm feeling like you are reporting to people above you and that you do not have my back and you do not have the back of anybody else. We're out here on our own.
I'm sorry you feel that way, Shelley. I'm really here today to just emphasize as strongly as I can my belief, our belief, that you should in fact continue to teach about controversial subjects. You should continue to do so in the ways that you've done, because it's been good, it's been effective, it's been professional. It hasn't been this mythical indoctrination. And at the same time, I have to say, please don't cross over that line and turn it into indoctrination. I think mythical belief that the law is intended to prohibit. I'm not really sure how to be plainer than that, but I hear you. We'll try to do better, but please hear that assurance.
Thank you, Shelley. Joe, you have your hand up, I assume, about this topic. Yeah, thank you.
I do. So I think part of what bothers me here is that we're being very abstract. And so I certainly hear, Provost Johnson, in your abstractness, an evasion of the specific dangers. And I hear a concern in the faculty, in the chat and Shelley's comment. Let's talk about some specifics here. Can you teach the Dred Scott case? Well, sure, officially you can. Is it going to make people feel a certain way? If it doesn't, they're not human. Are they going to then have grounds to sue? Will we be defended if we do?
No,
those are the
won't.
kinds of things.
So, Joe, let me interrupt right there. The law absolutely does not get in the way of that. Please know that. If you said to somebody, oh, the white students in this classroom should feel guilt because of Dred Scott, well, that would violate the law, I think. But that's not how people teach Dred Scott, right? The law does not prohibit discomfort. Education is discomfort. Teach Dred Scott. Bring primary source information that explains why people thought the way they did. If you want to understand the Civil War, read Southern newspapers from the 1850s. I'm not a historian, but yes, please don't feel that this law does not prohibit discomfort. It prohibits indoctrination.
Mason?
Let me try a different specific then to get an idea of some of the issues we're talking about. I mean, I'm teaching this week in my intro to philosophy class. We've just done a couple of weeks on theories of ethics and theories of justice, and now we're talking about theories of injustice. So I'm teaching people theories about oppression and privilege and how they work and why, as a society, we might need to address these. There's some widely adhered to misinformation denying that privilege even exists. So when I present the information saying, look, here are some statistics about success rates, poverty rates, likelihood of falling into poverty, getting out of poverty, and so on for different races. There's something structural about our society that makes it a little harder to get out of poverty if you're Black, for instance. And there's some good data to support these kinds of things. The students who've been taught by their community that privilege doesn't exist, and anyone who talks about it is trying to indoctrinate them. I'm not supposed to be objective between the misinformation and the evidence-based theories. I'm not supposed to be objective between injustice and justice. I can teach about different theories of justice and why people want to focus more on equality versus freedom or vice versa or whatever. But when you put up in the FAQ, for instance, I'm reading now that these should be taught in an objective manner without endorsement of the concepts. It's pretty hard to teach theories of injustice without endorsement of the concept of privilege or oppression as things that exist. So when we have students who deny that oppression is a factor in the United States, everybody's free, or deny that privilege is a factor, I'm white and I still feel oppressed. There's all kinds of ways in which there's some misinformation, misunderstandings underneath that. It's my job as a professor to help people sort of clearly understand the different theories, different approaches for dealing with this, for identifying this, for prioritizing this. But for a student who feels like privilege doesn't exist, I mean, part of what I'm trying to get us to sort of see, at least, is the ways in which we as a society might feel an obligation to take responsibility for fixing some of the injustices in our society. I'm not saying you should feel guilty, but we should feel responsible for correcting any injustices that exist in our society. It's easy for a student to misunderstand that. It's easy for a student to resist this kind of idea because they've been taught that privilege doesn't exist and oppression is a myth. And for those students, Shelley's very important question was, what is the process for adjudicating that? And I haven't heard an answer to what's the process. And the FAQ that says just teach this in an objective manner without endorsing the concepts really doesn't help us when the concepts we might need to endorse are that oppression exists and that we should think about how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And we have evidence and so on to support those claims as facts that oppression exists, not as theories some wackadoodles believe.
Yeah, I guess I'd distinguish. So you should do that teaching, Mason. You know, what you described is exactly what education is supposed to be, right? You have different understandings of justice and injustice. There's data about inequality in the US. At some point, you move from information, knowledge, fact to explanation, right? Theoretical explanation of the whys. Somewhere in there, there's a line not to cross, in which you can say, this is my understanding of the reasons based on, you know, I've looked at these different theories, constructs, explanations of this information. Here's why I believe the following. You can't require a student to agree with you. That's not about, I mean, what we have to require in our classes is that students understand and they demonstrate it. We can't require, you know, conversion. I mean, you know, that's the difference. And I know you do this. I mean, you're one of these wonderful teachers, but so what we,
I would certainly recommend that everybody has a statement in their syllabus that says you're not required to believe certain things, but you are required to understand the different points of view people might take on them. Something like that says that clearly to students.
I agree
but
with that.
We do still, this is very important, please. We do still have students who misunderstand, and in Shelley's case, maybe even deliberately misunderstand in order to bring a complaint. Right. I'd like to know more about the process, please, of how we deal with those complaints, not just they will be dealt with in a fair way.
Yeah. So it's not completely spelled out. I didn't intend to sound evasive. We know that we don't want to run through the normal OIE investigation of accusations of discrimination when it's the case of what's been said in a classroom in a way which is only relevant to the new provisions of HB 7. So we want to have a relatively simple and straightforward way for a small group of people to examine that. I haven't figured out exactly who's the right people in that small group. And here's the reason. It has to be people who understand the classroom, has to be people who can think through with a faculty member what they did and why. People who are willing to correct a faculty member if the faculty member crossed a line, who aren't automatically going to defend or be too quick to disagree, right? So who are the best people to do that? So that's what we haven't figured out yet. And I actually kind of appreciate hearing ideas from that. Not so today because I'm wrecking your time, but you know, this
Okay,
is,
we're
I
gonna-
think this is a little hard. And so let me say one of the reasons it's a little hard is that when push comes to shove, if there is a bad case, and I'm just going to repeat, you know, we've had 2 or 3 over the last several years where we took action against people. And it's usually a letter of reprimand when we take disciplinary action. Don't do that again. That's a very small number, given that the behavior that this law disapproves of is behavior that we would already have disapproved of. Okay, so, but if there is knowing, willful, continuing failure to abide by the law, we're actually going to have to act just like we've always had to act. If there's knowing, willing failure to abide by professional responsibilities in the classroom, I don't view it as hugely different. I do recognize that it's a new level of heightened concern.
Okay, thank you. Due to the time, I'm going to ask if Dr. Cartwright can come and speak to us for a little bit, and then we'll come back at the end here.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you. I was very much listening to the conversation and then couldn't find my unmute. Thank you. First, let me thank everybody for the robust discussion. I think this will help us tremendously as we continue to move forward. I think it's clear that we are going to make sure we outline that process in some specificity as soon as possible. It is something that I know that the provost and the team has been working through. So we'll try to get that to you and thank you. And we'll continue to work with all of you on these issues. I'm going to try to keep my remarks pretty brief, if I can, because I know we're running out of time. But I'll give you a few updates. The provost already said about the hires. Paul DeSalle has joined the team, and I do think that he's going to help us tremendously as we move forward. I'll say a little more about Paul. He is a professor of Latin American history. He specializes in modern history and also comes to us from the University of South Florida and has been working with Adrian Frame, and we're looking really at how we combine all of those activities around student success. Again, one of the things that I know Steve has been thinking about is how do we continue to even think more about student success across the whole institution. And so we look forward to working with all of you on that. We are happy to announce, and the announcement I hope it was supposed to go out this afternoon, but if it hasn't, you'll hear it before it goes out, that we actually successfully completed the search for the Senior VP for Advancement and Partnership. Rodney Grabowski is joining us in that role, and he's someone who's had decades of experience in philanthropy and other activities. He's most recently and currently actually serving as the Vice President for University Advancement at the University at Buffalo. I was there a while, but he wasn't there when I was there. He's actually someone who also has experience within the Florida system. He's actually worked in the state university system. And under his leadership, the University of Buffalo surpassed their $650 million a year goal early. They're headed towards $1 billion campaign now. They upped what they were trying to do. And it really is due to some back-to-back record-setting years for the university. So we look forward to welcoming him in this new division of advancement and strategic partnerships, which really allow us to think about how we foster connections across the university and out externally with all of our key constituents. Provost also mentioned that Vice President for Research, we've got to launch that search as soon as possible. And the idea being that we want to have any candidates that are finalists beyond the search committee to be able to come to campus and be here and meet with all of our faculty and get an opportunity for us to get feedback on those candidates in early fall if at all possible. We have to continue to push in that area because we really are. We want to make it into the state preeminence, and that has to do. Part of that, of course, has to do with our scholarship, specifically also with our postdocs and our science and engineering research expenditures. So that's something that they'll be focused on. A bit of good news is that we have received approval, of course, for some of the things related to the College of Nursing building, which was critical. We are looking at building a 90,000 square foot College of Nursing building on Lake Nona campus. It was possible because we actually have a lot of partners who really care about our nursing program. HCA, Orlando Health, Valencia College, Advent Health. Everybody was extremely supportive of us building out our capacity in this area so that we could actually educate more nurses, but also the fact that we will be educating additional educators for Valencia and Seminole State. And I think that's really a good fit for us. So this is good. We have to raise a lot of money from philanthropy to make that possible. The state money is a little bit below half of what we will need. We are going to have an aggressive process for raising that money, and that's already begun. So we are moving towards talking with people about how we can actually continue to move that forward. Switching gears a little bit more, we also, as part of the Florida Consortium of Metropolitan Universities, which is UCF, FIU, and USF, we received a $400,000 grant from Lumina Foundation to improve transfer success. And as you know, some of you may know, we've really been thinking a lot about how we continue to improve on the things we're doing in transfer. This institution is incredible in this area, has done a lot of great work in this area. Incredible success in graduating Pell eligible first generation minority students. And a lot of that, of course, is due to our robust transfer programs and support. And we want to do more. We want to make sure we can help people to get through faster. It is an initiative that started and is working specifically with Miami-Dade College. We're learning from each other, and we're going to continue to improve and break down barriers so that we can help more with our transfer success. And the last thing is, I just want to thank all of you for your part. And next week, again, we're going to be doing the commencement ceremony, and we will really be looking at the 5th and 6th of August. About 3,900 total degrees will be conferred. Last summer, we did 3,100 roughly degrees. 62% of those to transfer students, 54% to Pell eligible students, and 53% to minority students, and 27% to first generation. So we make a tremendous impact on our society, on this certainly this region, and a lot of that, of course, is due to you. So thank you. We look forward to that next week, and I hope some of you are able to participate. And I'll end there, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to give a very shortened version of my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, President Cartwright. We have time for like a question. Would anybody like to come along here? Oop, I see a clap. Ooh, a hand. Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for having this forum. I want to change direction of the conversations we've had to talk about fiscal management. So principal investigators were told that July 1st, we'd have access to our financials. And one thing that we should not be patient on is being able to manage our monies per our contract terms. And we still do not have our numbers. And that's a problem for someone like me that manages monies for our funding agencies that I'm responsible to charge for. When are we going to get our numbers? Because I would think that this could be a breach of our contract terms, because our policies say that we're going to be responsible for the money, yet we have no access to our money. So when are we going to get our numbers?
So, Dr. Duranzo, first, I'd like to know if you could help me to understand where you learned that you'll have it by July 1st.
The university sent us an email that said clearly that we would have our financials and our new dashboard on July 1st. It was a university sent email.
If you could forward that to me. So let me tell you what has been happening with that. So that all along with the conversion, several things were going to happen. In terms of grants and federal contracts, they were going to roll in. The HRS integration was just done yesterday. So all along it has been July 31st that will be completed. July 15th was a date that was driven around another set of deliverables because they had to be reconciled in. That's the process. So that's why I'm curious to know where did you learn July 1st? Because that was never part of the plan. So as far as I know, the HRS system just yesterday on target for the end of this month, those were converted by our research grant area. So I want to make sure I make that very, very clear. But I definitely want to run down that communication gap because that should not have been said because that was never part of the process. That HRS integration is an integration with HRS into Workday because we had built it into PeopleSoft with the help of an outside vendor. So that was never going to come over July 1. So that I'd like to definitely clear that up. And hopefully, if that was communicated, I just need to understand where and how the communication went out so we can clear that up as well with other constituents.
So when are we going to have our numbers?
They should be wrote. HRS just happened yesterday. I'll double check, but July, the end of the month of July was going to be the target date for that. So I definitely will follow up on that one because as I learn these things post go live, I want to make sure that everyone is clear as to how things were going to roll and occur.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're rolling out a new system and that the system is to make it easier for us to do our job, not add burden to our job. Is that the truth?
That is the truth. In some instances, I will say in full transparency, there are some things that are going to be different. And people are construing that as additional work. For example, I don't know if it will be around grants, but what the system is doing now is forcing accountability. Before people could sign papers and just submit papers to others and they do it on their behalf, things get locked up in systems, things sit on desks. What the system is forcing us to do is everything has to go through the system. So it's auditable, it's traceable. And quite frankly, we're learning quite a bit post go live because some of our processes that you couldn't model in a conversion, we're now realizing we're going to have to address. And that's going to require some cultural changes. So you might have to go in and click a button, like for example, time. We're setting up now a training specific for research faculty that we can walk through some of the things that they will have to do that is a little bit different, but it's better for the whole. So we can track things better, we can manage cash flow better, but there's some steps that are being added, which I think, quite frankly, are good, but some are construing that as additional steps they have to take. So we'll work through that as well, because that's a cultural thing that we're going to have to tackle as a university.
That's fine. So if I hear you correctly, the 30 or 40 emails I get for one subject matter item is going to be streamlined eventually.
Yes, it is. It will. I will tell you, I'm laughing because I heard that complaint as well. Please stop. Now, what was happening to us before is we were hearing we're not getting enough information. So we're actually moving now into what you hear this call next, is this group that we have created that are the subject matter experts to process everything. But our communications on night vision is what you're still seeing. September 15th is the date that we have targeted to decommission night vision and move and flow into our regular operations. But you will be getting information by certain categories still, because there are some folks that have picked up on it very well and they're moving quickly. And we do know that there are some people who are not picking it up as quickly, but our goal is to make sure that we help everyone, regardless of their level of understanding, because we definitely want everyone to be successful.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, everybody. That concludes our meeting today. We'll keep working with the administration from the Senate back and forth on these topics, and I'm sure we'll be talking about them in the fall when we get to our regular Senate meetings. So thank you again.